He poured boiling water on his 7 months pregnant wife. Not by accident. Not in a moment of carelessness. He did it deliberately, coldly, looking her straight in the eyes while she begged him to stop. He burned her skin, scarred her body, tried to destroy her spirit, all to please his mistress. He thought that would be the end of her, that she would disappear into her pain and shame. But what Tasha did next, what she planned in the weeks that followed, didn't just destroy his life. It totally ruined everything he built, stripped him of his power, his money, his reputation, and left him with nothing but regret. And he never saw it coming. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Houston, London, maybe Jamaica or Canada. We want to know. 3 years ago, Tasha was 25 years old, working as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup in downtown Chicago. She was ambitious, independent, and had her whole life planned out. She was going to build her career, travel the world, and maybe, just maybe, find love when the time was right. She wasn't looking for a man to complete her. She was already complete. Then she met Kelvin Richards at her cousin Monica's wedding reception. And Lord, that man knew how to make an entrance. Kelvin walked into that ballroom like he owned it. 6 feet 2 inches tall, wearing a custom-tailored navy blue suit that probably cost $3,000, diamond cufflinks catching the light every time he moved. He had this confidence about him, this presence that made everyone turn and look. He was talking business with the groomsmen, laughing that deep, rich laugh that seemed to fill the whole room, and when he smiled, it was like the sun had just come out. Tasha's cousin Monica grabbed her arm, squeezing tight. "Girl, do you see that fine man over there? That's Kelvin Richards. He owns that real estate development company that's been buying up properties all over the South Side. Word is he's worth millions. Millions, Tasha. And he's single." Tasha rolled her eyes. "Good for him. I'm not interested." "Child, you better get interested. Men like that don't stay single for long." But Tasha wasn't thinking about Kelvin Richards. She was thinking about the promotion she was trying to get at work, about the presentation she had to give on Monday, about her student loans and her savings account and all the practical things that actually mattered in life. She didn't have time for some rich man with a pretty smile. Except Kelvin had other plans. He found her at the bar 20 minutes later, appearing beside her so smoothly it was like he'd been there all along. "You must be Monica's cousin," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "She told me you'd be here. Said you're the smartest woman in the family." Tasha glanced at him, trying not to notice how good he smelled, like expensive cologne and success. Did she now? She did. And I can already tell she wasn't lying. He extended his hand. "Kelvin Richards. Tasha Williams." She shook his hand and his grip was firm, confident, warm. "So, Tasha Williams, what do you do when you're not being the most beautiful woman at wedding receptions?" She almost laughed. The line was smooth, too smooth, but there was something about the way he said it, like he actually meant it, that made her heart skip just a little. "I work in marketing. Tech industry. Nothing as impressive as buying up half the city, I'm sure." Kelvin's smile widened. "Smart and humble. I like that. Most women I meet, they hear about my business and suddenly they're my best friend. But you don't seem impressed at all. Should I be?" "No," he said, and his eyes got serious for just a moment. "Actually, that's exactly why I want to know more about you. You see past the surface. That's rare. That's valuable. And that's how it started." They talked for 2 hours straight that night. He asked her about her work, her dreams, her goals. He listened when she talked, really listened, nodding and asking follow-up questions like he genuinely cared. He quoted Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes, talked about building generational wealth for Black families, about creating opportunities in neighborhoods that banks had forgotten. He painted this picture of a future where they could build something together, something meaningful, something that would last. By the end of the night, Tasha had given him her number. And she went home thinking maybe, just maybe, she'd met someone special. The courtship was like something out of a movie. Kelvin took her to the best restaurants. He sent flowers to her office with little notes that made her coworkers jealous. He showed up at her apartment on random Tuesday nights with takeout from her favorite Thai place, just because he was thinking about her. He met her friends and charmed every single one of them. He was attentive, romantic, and he made Tasha feel like the most important person in the world. 6 months after they met, he proposed. He rented out the entire top floor of the John Hancock building, filled it with roses and candles, and got down on one knee with a 2-carat diamond ring that caught the city lights like a tiny constellation. "Tasha Williams," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are everything I've been looking for my entire life. You're intelligent, you're beautiful, you're strong, and you see me for who I really am, not just what I have. I want to build a life with you. I want to build an empire with you. Will you marry me? She said yes. Of course she said yes. How could she not? But there was one person who wasn't celebrating. Tasha's mother, Sandra Williams. The engagement party was at Kelvin's house, a massive property in Kenwood with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and a backyard that looked like something from a magazine. Everyone was drinking champagne and congratulating the happy couple. But Sandra pulled Tasha aside into one of the guest bedrooms upstairs, away from all the noise and laughter. "Baby," Sandra said, her voice low and urgent, her hands gripping Tasha's arms tight enough to hurt. "I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Mama, what's wrong? This is supposed to be a happy day. Something about that man doesn't sit right with my spirit." Sandra's eyes were searching Tasha's face, desperate, pleading. "He's too smooth, baby. Too perfect. Everything about him is too polished, too rehearsed. Men like that, they're always hiding something." Tasha pulled away, frustration building in her chest. "Mama, you're being paranoid. Kelvin loves me. He treats me better than any man I've ever dated. He's successful, he's ambitious, he wants to build a future with me. What more do you want? I want you to be careful." Sandra's voice cracked. "I want you to protect your heart. Because I've seen men like Kelvin before, and baby, they always show you who they really are after they've got you locked down. After you've said I do and signed those papers, and there's no easy way out. That's not fair, Mama. You don't even know him. I know men, Tasha. And I know when something's off. Please just wait. Give it more time. If he really loves you, he'll still be here in a year, 2 years. There's no rush." But Tasha wasn't listening. She was in love. She was happy. And her mother's warnings sounded like the fears of an older generation that didn't understand modern relationships, that couldn't see that some men really were good, really did mean what they said. "I'm marrying him, Mama," Tasha said firmly. "And I need you to support me. I need you to be happy for me." Sandra's face fell. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in that moment. "Okay, baby. Okay. I'll support you. But promise me something. Promise me that if things ever get bad, if he ever shows you that side I'm worried about, you'll leave. You'll come home. You won't stay and try to fix a man who doesn't want to be fixed. It won't come to that. Promise me anyway." Tasha sighed. "I promise, Mama. But you're worrying about nothing." They got married 4 months later in a beautiful ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden. 200 guests, a reception that cost $80,000, and a honeymoon in Bora Bora. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful. And for the first 6 months of marriage, it really was. Kelvin was still attentive, still romantic. They had date nights every Friday. He brought her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. They talked about starting a family, about the business they'd build together, about growing old in that big beautiful house. Tasha quit her job at the tech company because Kelvin said he wanted her to focus on them, on building their home, on preparing for the family they'd have. He said he made enough money for both of them, that she didn't need to work unless she wanted to. It made sense at the time. It felt like love. But then, slowly things started to change. It started small. Kelvin began coming home later from work. He'd say he had meetings, client dinners, property showings that ran long. Tasha would wait up for him with dinner ready, but by the time he got home at 10, 11, sometimes midnight, the food would be cold and he'd say he'd already eaten. Then he started being distant. When Tasha tried to talk to him about his day, he'd give one-word answers. When she suggested they go out, he'd say he was too tired. When she reached for him in bed, he'd turn away, saying he had an early morning. And then the criticism started. "Why is the house such a mess?" he'd say when he came home, even though Tasha had spent all day cleaning. "What do you even do all day? The dinner's cold. Can't you keep track of time? You're wearing that? To meet my business partners? Tasha, come on. I need you to look the part." Every comment was small, almost reasonable on its own. But they piled up. Day after day, week after week, until Tasha started questioning herself. Started wondering if maybe she really wasn't doing enough. If maybe she really was failing as a wife. Monica noticed during their monthly brunch. This was 8 months into the marriage, and Tasha had shown up looking tired, distracted, not quite herself. "Girl, what's going on with you?" Monica asked, setting down her mimosa and leaning forward. "You look exhausted. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Tasha said automatically, the lie coming easily now. "Just tired. Kelvin's been busy with work and I've been trying to keep up with the house and everything." "Tasha, you live in a huge house. Has he hired help? A housekeeper or something?" "He says he doesn't want strangers in our home. He wants me to take care of it." Monica's eyebrows went up. The whole house. That's like 5,000 square feet. That's not reasonable. It's fine. I don't mind. You don't mind, or you've been told you shouldn't mind? Monica's voice was gentle but firm. Because I remember when you and Kelvin first got together, you were so excited about starting your own business, about building something for yourself. What happened to that? Tasha looked down at her plate, pushing her eggs Benedict around with her fork. Kelvin thinks it's better if I focus on home right now. We're trying to start a family, and he says once we have kids, I'll be too busy anyway. And what do you think? The question hung in the air. What did Tasha think? She realized she hadn't asked herself that in months. She'd been so focused on being the wife Kelvin wanted, on making him happy, on keeping the peace, that she'd forgotten to think about what she wanted. I think, Tasha said slowly, that marriage is about compromise. And if this is what Kelvin needs from me right now, then I need to step up. Monica looked like she wanted to say more, but she just reached across the table and squeezed Tasha's hand. Okay. But if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Always. I know. Thank you. But Tasha didn't call Monica when things got worse. She didn't call anyone. By the time their first anniversary rolled around, Kelvin had become someone Tasha barely recognized. The warm, attentive man who'd courted her was gone. In his place was someone cold, critical, and often cruel. He snapped at her over little things. He complained constantly. He compared her to other women, his friends' wives, women he worked with. Michelle keeps her house spotless and she has 3 kids. What's your excuse? Sarah just started her own business while running a household. Why can't you be more like that? And then there was Jasmine. Tasha first heard the name about 14 months into the marriage. Kelvin mentioned her casually over breakfast one Saturday morning. I need to meet with Jasmine this afternoon. She's helping me close the deal on that property downtown. Jasmine? Tasha asked, looking up from her coffee. New investor. She's got connections I need. That was all he said. But something about the way he said her name, something about the way he wouldn't quite meet Tasha's eyes, made alarm bells go off in her head. She tried to ignore it. Tried to tell herself she was being paranoid, insecure, that this was just business. But then Kelvin started staying out later. Started being even more distant. Started smelling like perfume that wasn't hers when he came home. Tasha wasn't stupid. She knew what was happening. But she was also trapped. She'd quit her job. She'd isolated herself from her friends, spending all her time trying to be the perfect wife. She'd invested everything in this marriage, in this man, and the thought of admitting it was all falling apart was too painful to bear. So she stayed quiet. She smiled when Kelvin's business partners came over. She cooked and cleaned and played the role of the devoted wife. And she prayed that things would get better. Then she got pregnant. She found out on a random Tuesday afternoon. She'd been feeling sick for a week, exhausted, emotional. She took 3 pregnancy tests just to be sure, and all 3 came back positive. 2 pink lines that changed everything. Tasha was terrified and thrilled all at once. This wasn't how she'd planned it, not with things between her and Kelvin being so strained. But maybe, she thought, maybe a baby would bring them back together. Maybe this was what they needed. Maybe becoming parents would remind Kelvin of why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. She planned a special dinner to tell him. She cooked his favorite meal, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans. She bought a little baby onesie that said, Daddy's Little Champion, and wrapped it in tissue paper. She set the dining room table with their good china, lit candles, put on soft music. When Kelvin came home that night, 3 hours later than he'd said he would, Tasha was still waiting. The food had gone cold again, but she quickly reheated it, plastering a smile on her face. Hey baby, she said, trying to sound cheerful. I made your favorite. Come sit down. I have something to tell you. Kelvin barely looked at her. I already ate. Oh, well that's okay. Just come sit for a minute, please. This is important. He sighed like she was asking him to move a mountain, but he followed her to the dining room and sat down. He looked tired, irritated, like he wanted to be anywhere but here. Tasha sat across from him, her heart pounding. She slid the wrapped onesie across the table. Open it. He looked at the package like it might explode, then slowly unwrapped it. When he pulled out the tiny piece of clothing, his face went blank. Completely blank. I'm pregnant, Tasha said, her voice soft, hopeful. We're having a baby, Kelvin. We're going to be parents. For a long moment he said nothing. He just stared at the onesie in his hands. And then, finally, he looked up at her, and Tasha saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. It wasn't joy. It wasn't excitement. It was resentment. Are you sure? he asked, his voice flat. I took 3 tests. All positive. I'm about 6 weeks along. He set the onesie down on the table, carefully, like it was something dangerous. Well, he said, standing up. Congratulations. I need to make some calls. And then he walked away. Walked right out of the dining room, leaving Tasha sitting there alone with the cold food and the candles and the tiny piece of clothing that was supposed to change everything. That's when Tasha knew. Really knew, deep in her bones, that something was terribly wrong. That the man she'd married was gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. But she didn't know how bad it would get. She didn't know that in 4 months she'd be on her knees on the kitchen floor, 6 months pregnant, watching her husband pick up a pot of boiling water with murder in his eyes. She didn't know that the worst night of her life was coming. And she had no idea that what she'd do next would change both of their lives forever. The pregnancy changed everything, but not in the way Tasha had hoped. Kelvin became colder, more distant, like the news of the baby had built a wall between them that got thicker every single day. He stopped coming home for dinner altogether. He stopped sleeping in their bed most nights, saying he didn't want to disturb her rest. He stopped touching her, stopped looking at her, stopped pretending that everything was okay. And Jasmine's name started coming up more and more. I'm meeting Jasmine for lunch to discuss the Riverside project. Jasmine thinks we should invest in that new development on the west side. Jasmine said the funniest thing today. Jasmine. 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 The name became like poison in Tasha's ears. 2 months into the pregnancy, Tasha's morning sickness was so bad she could barely keep anything down. She'd spend hours hunched over the toilet, her whole body shaking, tears streaming down her face. And Kelvin? Kelvin would step over her on his way out the door, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something someone was saying. One morning, Tasha was so weak she couldn't get up off the bathroom floor. She called Kelvin's phone 6 times. He didn't answer. She finally texted him, "Please come home. I need help. I can't get up." He texted back 3 hours later. "Call your mother. I'm in a meeting." That's when Tasha realized she was completely alone in this marriage. She was carrying this man's child, living in his house, and she was completely, utterly alone. But she didn't call her mother. She couldn't. Because calling her mother meant admitting that Sandra had been right all along. It meant admitting that she'd made a terrible mistake. It meant facing the truth that the life she'd built was nothing but a beautiful lie. So Tasha picked herself up off that bathroom floor. She cleaned herself up. She forced herself to eat. And she told herself that things would get better. They had to get better. Except they got worse. By the time Tasha was 4 months pregnant, Kelvin wasn't even trying to hide what he was doing anymore. He'd come home smelling like perfume and lie right to her face when she asked where he'd been. He'd leave his phone on the counter and step out of the room, and Tasha would see text messages lighting up the screen. Messages from Jasmine. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. When are you going to tell her?" Tasha's hands would shake as she read them, her heart breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. But she still didn't say anything. Because what could she say? She was pregnant, unemployed, financially dependent on a man who clearly didn't love her anymore. What were her options? Then came the night that changed everything. The night Monica called her, her voice tight with anger and something else. Something that sounded like pity. "Tasha," Monica said. "I need to tell you something and you're not going to want to hear it. But I love you and I can't keep this to myself anymore." Tasha's stomach dropped. She was sitting on the couch in the living room, her hand resting on her growing belly, and she already knew. She already knew what Monica was about to say. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I saw Kelvin tonight. At Morton's Steakhouse. He was with a woman." Silence. "Tasha, they weren't just having dinner. He had his arm around her. He was kissing her. Right there in public, like he didn't care who saw. Like he wasn't a married man with a pregnant wife at home." Tasha couldn't breathe. The room was spinning and she couldn't breathe. Her name tag said Jasmine. She works at the restaurant, I think, or she's a regular, I don't know. But Tasha, everyone there knew them. The staff was smiling at them like they were a couple. Like they'd been there together before. "Okay," Tasha said. Just that one word. "Okay. Okay? Tasha, did you hear what I just said? Your husband is cheating on you. In public. While you're pregnant with his child. I heard you. So what are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was she going to do? Confront him? Leave him? Stay and pretend she didn't know? Every option felt impossible. "I don't know," Tasha said finally. "I need to think." "Tasha, you can't just think about this. You need to do something. You need to leave him." "I'm pregnant, Monica." I'm 4 months pregnant, I don't have a job, I don't have any money of my own. Where am I supposed to go? You come stay with me. Or you go to your mother's. But you cannot stay with a man who treats you like this. You cannot raise a child in this environment. But Tasha did stay. Because she was scared. Because she didn't know how to leave. Because some small, desperate part of her still hoped that maybe if she tried harder, if she was better, if she could just figure out what she was doing wrong, Kelvin would come back to her. That night, when Kelvin came home at 2 a.m, Tasha was waiting in the living room. The house was dark except for one lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the walls. "Where were you?" she asked when he walked in. He didn't even have the decency to look surprised. "Working. At Morton's Steakhouse?" Now he looked at her. Really looked at her. And there was something in his eyes, something cold and calculating, like he was trying to figure out how much she knew and how much he could get away with lying about. "Who told you that?" he asked. "Does it matter? Were you there or not?" "I had a business dinner." "With Jasmine?" The name hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Kelvin's jaw tightened. He set his keys down on the table by the door, and when he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. "What I do for my business is none of your concern. You're my husband. You're the father of my child. Everything you do is my concern." He laughed then. Actually laughed. It was a harsh, cruel sound that made Tasha's skin crawl. "Your child? Tasha, let's be real here. That baby is the only reason you're still in this house. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be tied down to you for the next 18 years? The words hit Tasha like a physical blow. She felt like she couldn't breathe, like someone had punched all the air out of her lungs. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying that you trapped me. You got pregnant on purpose to lock me down, and now I'm stuck with you. That's not true. We both wanted a baby. You said you wanted to start a family. I lied." He said it so casually, so easily, like he was talking about the weather. "I told you what you wanted to hear. And you were so desperate to believe it that you fell for every word." Tasha's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "Then why did you marry me? If you never loved me, if this was all a lie, why did you marry me?" Kelvin smiled, and it was the cruelest smile Tasha had ever seen. "Because you were safe. You were respectable. You were the kind of woman I could bring to business dinners and charity events. You made me look good. But love? No, Tasha. I never loved you. I was just playing a role, and you were naive enough to believe it." The room was spinning. Tasha gripped the arm of the couch to steady herself, her other hand protectively covering her belly. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. "And Jasmine?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Jasmine is everything you're not. She's exciting. She's passionate. She understands me. She doesn't nag me or need me or make me feel like I'm suffocating every time I walk through the door. I'm your wife. You're a mistake I'm paying for." The words shattered something inside Tasha. Something fundamental and important, something that could never be put back together. She stood up, her legs shaking, her whole body trembling with rage and grief and despair. "Get out," she said. "Excuse me?" "I said get out. This is my home too. Get out." Kelvin's face twisted with anger. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, getting right in Tasha's face. She could smell alcohol on his breath mixed with that perfume. Jasmine's perfume. "This is my house," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Everything in this house is mine. The furniture, the car in the garage, the clothes on your back. You own nothing. You are nothing. And if you think for 1 second that you can tell me what to do in my own home, you're even dumber than I thought." He pushed past her then, his shoulder slamming into hers hard enough to make her stumble. She heard him go upstairs, heard a door slam, and then there was silence. Horrible, suffocating silence. Tasha sank back down onto the couch, and this time she let the tears come. She cried for the life she thought she'd have. She cried for the man she thought she'd married. She cried for her baby who was going to be born into this nightmare. And she cried for herself, for the woman she used to be, the strong, independent woman who would never have let anyone treat her this way. What had she become? After that night, things somehow got even worse. Kelvin stopped pretending altogether. He'd bring Jasmine's name up constantly, throwing it in Tasha's face like a weapon. "Jasmine thinks you should lose some weight before the baby comes. She says pregnancy isn't an excuse to let yourself go. Jasmine made the best dinner last night. Actually knew how to season food properly. Jasmine thinks I should make you sign a postnuptial agreement. Says I'm too generous letting you live here for free." Every comment was designed to hurt, to humiliate, to make Tasha feel smaller and smaller until she disappeared completely. And it was working. Tasha stopped looking at herself in mirrors. She stopped calling her friends. She stopped leaving the house unless she absolutely had to. She became a ghost in her own life, just going through the motions, waiting for something to change. Then, at 5 months pregnant, Tasha met Jasmine face to face. She'd gone to the grocery store, something she rarely did anymore because she hated going out in public, hated the way people looked at her like they could see how pathetic she was. She was in the produce section, trying to decide between 2 bunches of grapes, when she heard a voice behind her. "You must be Tasha." Tasha turned around and there she was. Jasmine. She was everything Kelvin had implied she'd be. Tall, beautiful, perfectly put together in designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Her hair was styled in long, elegant waves, her makeup was flawless, and she was looking at Tasha with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Tasha asked, even though she already knew. She already knew exactly who this woman was. "I'm Jasmine. I work with Kelvin." She said it so casually, so easily, like they were just 2 women meeting at the grocery store, not a wife and her husband's mistress. Tasha's hand instinctively went to her belly, protective, defensive. "I know who you are." Jasmine's smile widened. "Good. Then we can skip the awkward introductions. I just wanted to see you for myself. Kelvin talks about you all the time." "I'm sure he does. He says you're struggling. With the pregnancy, with taking care of the house, with everything. He says you're overwhelmed." Every word was a knife, carefully aimed and perfectly placed. Tasha could feel her face burning with humiliation, but she forced herself to stand tall, to not let this woman see how much this was destroying her. "Is there something you want?" Tasha asked, her voice cold. "I just think it's important that we understand each other." Jasmine stepped closer and Tasha could smell her perfume. The same perfume she'd been smelling on Kelvin for months. "Kelvin and we have something real. Something you could never give him. And honestly, I think deep down you know that. You know he doesn't love you. You know this marriage is over. He's my husband. He's my future." Jasmine's voice was soft, almost gentle, which made her words even more cruel. "And that baby you're carrying? That's the only thing keeping you relevant. But babies grow up, Tasha. And when yours does, when Kelvin doesn't need you to play mommy anymore, where does that leave you? A sad, desperate woman clinging to a man who can't stand to look at her." Tasha's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of this woman. Stay away from my husband." Jasmine laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made Tasha want to scream. "Oh honey, he's not yours. He hasn't been yours for a long time. You're just too pathetic to see it." And then she walked away, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving Tasha standing there in the produce section, shaking, humiliated, broken. That night, Tasha tried to tell Kelvin what happened. Tried to tell him that his mistress had confronted her, had threatened her, had said terrible things. But Kelvin just shrugged. "Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you wouldn't see everything as a threat," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "Jasmine was probably just trying to be friendly and you took it the wrong way. Like you always do. She called me pathetic, Kelvin. She said I was desperate and sad. Well, are you?" The question hung in the air. Tasha stared at her husband, this man she'd promised to love for better or worse, and she realized she didn't even recognize him anymore. Or maybe she'd never known him at all. Maybe this was who he'd always been and she'd just been too blind to see it. "I want a divorce," she said quietly. Kelvin finally looked up from his phone. His eyes were cold, amused. "No, you don't." "Yes, I do. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this." "And where are you going to go? Back to your mother's? Back to that tiny apartment she has in Bronzeville? You going to raise a baby in 1 bedroom with no money, no job, no prospects?" He stood up, walking toward her slowly, like a predator circling prey. "You're going to stay right here, Tasha. Because you have no other choice. You're stuck with me just like I'm stuck with you. So you might as well get used to it. I'll get a lawyer. I'll take half of everything." He laughed again. "Try it. See what happens. I have the best lawyers in Chicago on retainer. They'll bear you. And when it's all over, you'll walk away with nothing and I'll have full custody of that baby. Is that what you want?" Tasha felt the fight drain out of her. Because he was right. She had no money, no job, no way to fight him. He'd thought of everything. He'd trapped her completely. She was his prisoner and they both knew it. The next 2 weeks were the darkest of Tasha's life. She barely ate. She barely slept. She moved through the house like a zombie, just existing, just surviving. Kelvin barely acknowledged her presence. He'd come and go as he pleased, sometimes not coming home for days at a time. And when he was home he treated Tasha like she was invisible. Until the night it all came crashing down. The night was silent when Kelvin returned, smelling of Jasmine's perfume and alcohol. Tasha heard the front door slam, heard his heavy footsteps moving through the house. She was in the kitchen, staring blankly at the pot of water on the stove, watching the bubbles rise and pop on the surface. She'd been making herself tea, though she couldn't remember why now. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. Kelvin strode into the kitchen, his presence heavy with arrogance and something darker. Something dangerous. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie was loose, and that perfume, Jasmine's perfume, clung to him like a second skin. His eyes locked onto Tasha, and she saw something in them that made her blood run cold. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. Still up, he sneered, leaning against the counter. Still pretending you're special? Still pretending you matter? Tasha didn't respond. She'd learned that silence was safer than words. But tonight, something inside her snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the tiny flicker of the woman she used to be, fighting to survive. I want a divorce, Kelvin, she said quietly, her hand resting protectively on her belly. I can't do this anymore. Kelvin's lips curled into a bitter smile. You think you can walk away from me? You think you have that power? Yes, Tasha whispered, her voice shaking but defiant. Yes, I do. The smile vanished from Kelvin's face, replaced by something cold and terrifying. He straightened up, his eyes never leaving hers, and slowly, deliberately, he walked toward the stove. Let's see if you still think that, he said, his voice eerily calm now. Before Tasha could process what was happening, Kelvin grabbed the pot of boiling water. Steam rose from the surface and Tasha's heart stopped. Kelvin, no. Without warning, without hesitation, he poured the boiling water across her chest and arms. The scream that tore from Tasha's throat was primal, animalistic. The pain was beyond anything she'd ever experienced, white-hot, searing, unbearable. She fell to her knees, clutching at her burned skin, her body convulsing with agony. The smell of burned flesh filled the air, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Tasha registered that it was her own skin she was smelling. But what hurt more than the physical pain, what shattered her more completely than the burns, was the realization washing over her like a second wave of boiling water. The man she loved had become a monster. Kelvin stood over her, looking down at her writhing form with cold satisfaction. No remorse. No horror at what he'd just done. Just satisfaction. Pathetic, he mocked, his voice dripping with contempt. Look at you. On the floor where you belong. No one will want you now, Tasha. Not like this. Not scarred and broken and desperate. Tasha couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The pain was too intense, the shock too overwhelming. She just knelt there on the cold kitchen floor, 6 months pregnant, burned and broken, staring up at the man she'd promised to love forever. And in that moment, something inside Tasha died. The love she'd clung to so desperately, the hope that had kept her trapped in this nightmare, the belief that maybe somehow things could get better, all of it vanished like smoke. But something else was born in its place. Something harder. Something fiercer. Something that wouldn't be broken or burned or beaten down. Kelvin turned and walked away, leaving her there on the floor. She heard him go upstairs, heard a door slam, and then there was silence. Tasha didn't know how long she stayed there. Minutes. Hours. Time had lost all meaning. Eventually, when she could finally move, she dragged herself to the bathroom, every movement agony, her burned skin screaming with each breath. She stood in front of the mirror, forcing herself to look at her reflection. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. Her arms and chest were covered in angry red burns, already starting to blister. Her face was swollen and tear-stained. Her eyes were hollow, haunted. This wasn't the confident, ambitious woman who'd walked into that wedding reception 3 years ago. This wasn't even the hopeful, loving wife who'd tried so hard to make her marriage work. This was a woman who'd been pushed to the absolute breaking point. But as Tasha stared at her reflection, as she really looked at herself for the first time in months, she saw something else. Something Kelvin hadn't been able to burn away. Strength. She was still standing. Still breathing. Still alive. And she was carrying a child who deserved better than this. Who deserved a mother who knew how to fight back. Tasha cleaned her burns as best she could, biting down on a towel to keep from screaming. The pain was excruciating, but she welcomed it now. It was proof that she was still here. Still capable of feeling. Still capable of surviving. As she wrapped gauze around her arms, Tasha made a decision. A vow. A promise to herself and to the child growing inside her. She would not let Kelvin or Jasmine break her any longer. She would fight back. And when she was done, Kelvin Richards would regret the day he ever thought she was weak. The next morning, Tasha woke up before dawn, her whole body aching but her mind crystal clear for the first time in months. Kelvin was still asleep upstairs, probably passed out from the alcohol. She had time. She went to her laptop, the one Kelvin had bought her as an anniversary gift and then promptly forgotten about. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she opened a new document. She started writing. Everything. Every insult. Every threat. Every moment of abuse. Every time he'd mentioned Jasmine. Every lie he'd told. Every dollar he'd spent on his mistress that should have been family money. She documented it all, with dates and times and as much detail as she could remember. When Kelvin came down 3 hours later, Tasha was in the kitchen, that same submissive mask back on her face, making him breakfast like nothing had happened. He looked at her bandaged arms and smirked. "Learned your lesson?" "Yes," Tasha said softly, keeping her eyes down. "I'm sorry. You're right. I need to be grateful for everything you've given me." Kelvin seemed satisfied with that. He ate his breakfast, checked his phone, and left for work without another word. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, Tasha got to work. She went through every drawer, every file cabinet, every box in Kelvin's home office. She photographed bank statements, credit card bills, business contracts. She found receipts for jewelry he'd bought Jasmine, $15,000 worth. She found texts he'd printed out and forgotten about, explicit messages between him and his mistress, planning their future together while he was still married. She found everything she needed. Then Tasha did something she hadn't done in over a year. She called Monica. "Tasha?" Monica answered on the first ring, her voice worried. "Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Are you okay?" "No," Tasha said, and her voice was surprisingly steady. "I'm not okay. But I'm going to be. Monica, I need your help. I need you to help me find a lawyer. A good one. Someone who specializes in divorce and domestic abuse cases." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Monica said, "What happened?" "Everything. But I can't talk about it over the phone. Can you come over today? While Kelvin's at work." "I'm on my way right now." Monica arrived 30 minutes later, and when she saw Tasha's burns, when she saw the evidence Tasha had collected, when she heard what Kelvin had done, she actually started crying. "We're getting you out of here," Monica said fiercely. "Today. Right now. You're coming to stay with me." "No," Tasha said calmly. "Not yet. If I leave now, I'll have nothing. No money, no security, no leverage. Kelvin will take everything, including my baby. I need to be smart about this. I need to plan. Tasha, he poured boiling water on you. He could have killed you. He could have killed the baby. I know. And that's exactly why I need to do this right. I need to destroy him, Monica. Completely. So he can never hurt me or my child again." Monica stared at her friend, seeing something new in Tasha's eyes. Something hard and determined and absolutely unbreakable. "Okay," Monica said finally. "Okay. I know a lawyer. Sarah Chin. She's the best divorce attorney in Chicago, and she doesn't lose. But Tasha, she's expensive. How are you going to pay for her?" Tasha held up a diamond bracelet, one of the many expensive pieces of jewelry Kelvin had bought her over the years to assuage his guilt. "I'm going to start selling these. All of them. Everything he ever gave me. I'll get enough for a retainer and we'll figure out the rest." Over the next 2 weeks, Tasha became a different person. On the surface, she was still the submissive, broken wife Kelvin expected. She cooked his meals, cleaned his house, smiled when he came home. She didn't complain when he stayed out late with Jasmine. She didn't argue when he criticized her. She just nodded and agreed and played her role perfectly. But underneath, she was planning, calculating, preparing for war. She met with Sarah Chin in secret, in a coffee shop across town where she knew Kelvin would never go. Sarah was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a reputation for destroying cheating husbands in court. "Show me what you have," Sarah said, and Tasha laid out everything. The documented abuse. The financial records. The proof of Kelvin's affair. The photographs of her burns. Sarah's expression grew darker and darker as she reviewed the evidence. Finally, she looked up at Tasha and said, "This is good. This is really good. With this, we can not only get you a divorce, we can make sure you walk away with everything. The house, the business assets, full custody, alimony, everything." "I don't want alimony," Tasha said quietly. "I want the business. I want to take what he built and turn it into something better. Something that actually helps people instead of just feeding his ego." Sarah raised an eyebrow. You understand that's going to be a fight? He's not going to hand over his company without a war. Good, Tasha said, and there was steel in her voice. Let him fight. Let him see what happens when he underestimates me. Tasha sold her jewelry piece by piece, using different pawn shops and online buyers so Kelvin wouldn't notice. She raised $8,000 for Sarah's retainer and started building a war chest. She opened a secret bank account in her name only. She started researching Kelvin's business, understanding the deals he was working on, the partnerships he'd formed, the vulnerable points in his empire. And all the while she smiled and played the devoted wife. Kelvin, arrogant and oblivious, never suspected a thing. He was too busy with Jasmine, too confident in his control over Tasha, to see what was happening right under his nose. One night, about 3 weeks after the boiling water incident, Tasha was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Kelvin came home early. He was actually in a good mood, which was rare these days. Jasmine and I are going to Miami this weekend, he announced, grabbing a beer from the refrigerator. Business trip. Don't wait up. Of course, Tasha said sweetly, stirring the pasta sauce. Whatever you need. He looked at her suspiciously, like he was waiting for her to protest, to cry, to beg him not to go. When she didn't, he seemed almost disappointed. You're being very agreeable lately, he said. Why? Tasha turned to face him, keeping her expression neutral, almost apologetic. You were right, Kelvin. About everything. I was needy and desperate, and I was making your life miserable. I'm trying to be better. To be the wife you deserve. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded, satisfied. Good. It's about time you figured that out. Maybe there's hope for you after all. He left the room, and Tasha went back to stirring the sauce, a small, cold smile playing at her lips. Let him think he'd won. Let him think she was beaten. He had no idea what was coming. But the pressure kept building. Kelvin became increasingly dismissive and cruel, his confidence growing with each day that Tasha didn't fight back. He started treating her like a servant, ordering her around, criticizing everything she did. The house is a mess, he'd say even when it was spotless. Dinner is terrible, he'd complain, pushing his plate away even though he'd eaten most of it. You look awful. No wonder I prefer spending time with Jasmine. Every comment was designed to break her down, to remind her of her place. And Tasha took it all with a smile and a nod, filing it away, adding it to her growing list of evidence. Then one afternoon Jasmine showed up at the house. Tasha was 7 months pregnant now, her belly round and heavy, moving slower than usual. She answered the door and there was Kelvin's mistress, standing on her porch like she owned the place, wearing a designer dress and a cruel smile. Hello Tasha, Jasmine said. Mind if I come in? Kelvin told me to stop by and pick up some documents he left in his office. Tasha knew it was a lie. Knew Jasmine was here to gloat, to rub her victory in Tasha's face. But she stepped aside and let the woman in, still playing her role. Jasmine walked through the house like she was inspecting it, touching things, commenting on the decor. It's nice, she said, though her tone implied the opposite. A bit dated but nice. Kelvin and I are looking at condos downtown. Something more modern. More sophisticated. That sounds lovely, Tasha said, her voice flat. Jasmine turned to face her and her smile turned vicious. You know what's funny? You're standing here in this house, pregnant with his child, playing housewife. And you think that gives you power. You think that makes you important. She stepped closer, invading Tasha's space. But let me tell you something. You're nothing but an obligation to him. A burden he's counting down the days until he can get rid of. And that baby? That's just 18 years of child support payments. It doesn't make you special. It makes you a sad, desperate woman clinging to a man who can't stand the sight of you. Tasha looked at Jasmine, really looked at her, and she saw it. The insecurity. The desperation. Because Kelvin hadn't left Tasha yet, had he? Despite all his promises to Jasmine, despite all his cruelty toward his wife, he was still here. Still living in this house. Still legally married. And Jasmine knew it. She knew she hadn't really won. Is there anything else you need? Tasha asked calmly. Or was insulting me the only reason you came? Jasmine's face flushed with anger. You think you're so strong, don't you? So noble and long-suffering. But your time is up, Tasha. Kelvin is mine. He's always been mine. You were just a placeholder. A pretty face to bring to business dinners while he figured out what he really wanted. And now that he knows, now that he has me, you're obsolete. Then why are you here? Tasha asked, and for the first time she let a little bit of steel show in her voice. If you've already won, if I'm so pathetic and irrelevant, why do you feel the need to come to my home and tell me that? Why do you care what I think or feel? Jasmine's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. I think you should leave, Tasha said, walking to the door and opening it. Tell Kelvin I'll have those documents ready for him when he gets home. Jasmine left, but not before throwing one last venomous look over her shoulder. You'll regret this. Both of you will regret underestimating me. Tasha closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. But she wasn't afraid. She was exhilarated. Because Jasmine had just shown her hand. She was scared. Insecure. And that made her dangerous, yes, but it also made her vulnerable. That night, Tasha called Sarah Chin. I'm ready, she said. Let's do this. Let's take him down. Are you sure? Sarah asked. Once we file, there's no going back. Kelvin will know you're fighting and he'll fight dirty. I'm counting on it, Tasha said. I want him to fight. I want him to show everyone exactly who he really is. And then I want to watch his whole world crumble. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, Okay. I'll start preparing the papers. But Tasha, I need you to do something for me first. I need you to plan something big. Something public. Something that will make sure everyone sees what Kelvin has done and who he really is. Can you do that? A slow smile spread across Tasha's face. Actually, she said, I have the perfect idea. 3 weeks later, Tasha put her plan into motion. Kelvin had been talking about hosting a dinner party for months. Something big, something impressive to show off to his business partners and investors. He wanted to prove that despite the rumors circulating about his personal life, he was still the same successful, put-together businessman they'd always known. Tasha encouraged it, pushed for it even. She told him it was a brilliant idea, that it would show everyone how strong they were as a couple, how the gossip about him and Jasmine was just that, gossip. Kelvin, flattered and oblivious, agreed immediately. Make it perfect, he told her. I'm inviting everyone who matters. The Hendersons, the Johnsons, Marcus and his wife, even my business partner Stephen and his family. This needs to be the party of the year. It will be, Tasha promised, and she meant it. Just not in the way Kelvin expected. Over the next 3 weeks, Tasha transformed. She hired a caterer, using money from her secret account. She sent out elegant invitations. She decorated the house until it looked like something from a magazine. She played the role of the perfect hostess, planning every detail with meticulous care. But she was planning something else too. Something Kelvin would never see coming. Sarah Chin had been working behind the scenes, filing divorce papers, preparing legal documents, gathering additional evidence. But she'd agreed to wait until after the dinner party to serve Kelvin. Because what Tasha had planned was so much better than a quiet legal filing. She was going to destroy him in front of everyone he cared about. The night of the party arrived. The house was filled with flowers, candles, and soft music. Tasha had hired servers in crisp white shirts to circulate with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. She'd even hired a string quartet to play in the corner of the living room. And she looked stunning. She'd bought a dress, a deep emerald green that complemented her skin tone perfectly and somehow made her 7.5-month pregnant belly look elegant instead of awkward. She'd done her hair and makeup, covered the scars on her arms with carefully applied concealer and long sleeves, and when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked powerful, confident, like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Kelvin noticed. When he came downstairs and saw her, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. Maybe even a hint of the attraction he'd once felt for her. You look good, he said almost grudgingly. Thank you, Tasha replied, her voice smooth as silk. I want tonight to be perfect for you. For us. The guests started arriving at 7. Marcus and his wife Diane came first, old friends of Kelvin's from college. Then came the Hendersons, a wealthy couple who'd invested in several of Kelvin's properties. Stephen Chin, Kelvin's business partner, arrived with his wife and teenage daughter. And then at 7:30 Jasmine walked through the door. Tasha had sent her an invitation too. Had Monica hand deliver it with a note that said, Kelvin asked me to make sure you were here. He said it was important. It was a lie, of course. Kelvin had no idea Jasmine was coming. But Jasmine, confident in her place in Kelvin's life, had shown up anyway, wearing a dress that was far too revealing for a dinner party and heels that clicked loudly against the marble floor. The moment Kelvin saw her, his face went pale. He pulled Tasha aside, his grip tight on her arm. What is she doing here? He hissed. Tasha blinked innocently. Jasmine? She's your business partner, isn't she? I thought you'd want her here. You talk about her so much, I assumed she was important to you. Kelvin's jaw clenched. He knew he couldn't make a scene, couldn't throw Jasmine out without raising questions. So he plastered on a smile and went to greet her, trying to act like her presence was perfectly normal. Tasha watched Jasmine touch Kelvin's arm possessively, watched him try to maintain distance while also not wanting to offend her. It was already starting to unravel, and the real show hadn't even begun. Dinner was served at 8. Tasha had arranged the seating carefully, Kelvin at the head of the table, herself at the opposite end. Jasmine seated right next to Kelvin, close enough that everyone would notice. Close enough that the whispers would start. And they did. Tasha could see the other wives exchanging glances, could see Marcus raise an eyebrow when Jasmine laughed too loudly at something Kelvin said. Could see Stephen's wife lean over and whisper something to her daughter. The first course was served, a beautiful butternut squash soup. Conversation flowed, polite and pleasant on the surface, but Tasha could feel the tension building. Could see Kelvin getting more and more uncomfortable as Jasmine became more and more bold, touching his hand, leaning into him, acting like they were together. When the main course came, perfectly cooked filet mignon with roasted vegetables, Tasha stood up. She tapped her glass with a spoon and the room fell silent. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," she said, her voice clear and strong. "It means so much to Kelvin and me to have our closest friends and business partners here to share this evening with us." Kelvin relaxed slightly, thinking this was just a normal dinner party toast. But Tasha wasn't done. "Marriage is interesting, isn't it?" she continued, walking slowly around the table. "When you first get married, you think you know the person you're committing to. You think you understand who they are, what they value, what they're capable of." She paused behind Kelvin's chair, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. She felt him stiffen. But then time passes and you start to see the truth. The mask comes off. And you realize that the person you married is someone completely different than who you thought they were. "Tasha," Kelvin said, his voice tight. "Maybe we should." "Did you know," Tasha interrupted, moving away from him and continuing around the table, "that Kelvin has been having an affair for the past year and a half?" The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Every eye was on Tasha now, wide with shock. Kelvin shot to his feet. "Tasha, stop this right now." "With Jasmine," Tasha continued, looking directly at the woman in question. Jasmine's face had gone white. "In fact, they're sitting right next to each other. How convenient." "This is inappropriate," Kelvin said, his voice shaking with rage. "You need to stop talking. Now." "Why?" Tasha asked, and her voice was calm, almost curious. "Because I'm embarrassing you? Because I'm telling the truth in front of people who matter? Isn't that what you've been doing to me for months? Humiliating me, belittling me, making me feel like I was nothing?" She reached into the small purse she'd been carrying and pulled out a folder. She opened it and began pulling out papers, laying them on the table for everyone to see. Credit card statements showing that Kelvin spent over $70,000 on jewelry, clothes, and trips for his mistress. Bank records showing he withdrew money from our joint account. Money that was supposed to be for our family, to pay for her apartment. Text messages between them planning their future together while I was pregnant with his child. She placed each piece of evidence on the table like she was dealing cards. The guests were frozen, some leaning forward to look at the documents, others sitting back in horror. "Tasha, I'm warning you," Kelvin started. "And this," Tasha said, and now her voice shook slightly, "is a photograph of the burns I received 3 weeks ago when my husband poured boiling water on me." She pulled up her sleeves, revealing the still healing burns on her arms. Several people gasped. Diane actually stood up, her hand over her mouth. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Stephen was on his feet, staring at Kelvin in horror. Marcus was shaking his head, backing away from the table. The wives were whispering frantically to each other. "This is insane," Kelvin said, trying to regain control. "She's making this up. She's been unstable lately, the pregnancy hormones." "I have medical records," Tasha said calmly. She pulled out another document. "From the emergency room I visited the next day. The doctor documented second-degree burns on my arms, chest, and shoulders, consistent with scalding water. He also documented that I was 6 months pregnant at the time and that I told him my husband had done this to me." Kelvin's face was turning red, his hands clenched into fists. "You went to the hospital? You told them?" "I told them the truth." Tasha's voice was steel now. "Something you seem incapable of doing." Jasmine suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous. Kelvin, tell them. Tell them she's lying." "Oh, Jasmine," Tasha said, turning to face her. "I didn't forget about you. Did you know that Kelvin has been telling you he's going to leave me for over a year? That he's been stringing you along, making promises he never intended to keep?" Jasmine's confident expression faltered. That's not true. Kelvin loves me. We're going to be together. Really? Tasha pulled out her phone and started reading. These are text messages from Kelvin to his business partners. Jasmine is getting clingy. I need to figure out how to end this without causing drama. That's from 2 weeks ago. Jasmine looked at Kelvin, her eyes wide. Kelvin. She's taking things out of context, Kelvin said, but his voice lacked conviction now. Here's another one, Tasha continued. Jasmine thinks I'm leaving Tasha after the baby is born. I'm not that stupid. The divorce would cost me millions. Better to just keep things as they are. You said you loved me. Jasmine shrieked, her voice breaking. You said I was the one. He's been playing both of us, Tasha said almost gently. Making us both believe we were special while he protected himself and his money. The only person Kelvin has ever loved is Kelvin. The room was in chaos now. Stephen was grabbing his wife and daughter, heading for the door. Marcus was confronting Kelvin, demanding to know if any of this was true. Diane was crying, holding on to Tasha's hand. And then, at the height of the chaos, there was a knock at the door. Tasha walked calmly through the confusion and opened it. Sarah Chin stood there, flanked by 2 police officers and a process server. Mrs. Richards? The process server said. Yes. These are for your husband. He handed her a thick envelope. Divorce papers. He's being served. Tasha took the envelope and walked back into the dining room. The police officers followed her, and everyone fell silent again. Kelvin Richards? One of the officers said. Kelvin's face was ashen now. What? We have a protective order here. You're being ordered to vacate this property immediately. Mrs. Richards has filed for divorce and has documented evidence of domestic abuse. You have 30 minutes to pack essential belongings and leave. This is my house. Kelvin roared. You can't kick me out of my own house. Actually, Sarah Chin said, stepping forward, the house is in both your names, as is everything purchased during the marriage. And given the documented abuse and the fact that Mrs. Richards is pregnant, the court has granted her exclusive use of the marital home pending the divorce proceedings. She pulled out more papers. We're also filing for full custody of the unborn child, emergency spousal support, and we're freezing all joint accounts to prevent you from hiding assets. Kelvin's eyes went wild. He looked around the room at all his friends, his business partners, his mistress, and his wife. And for the first time, Tasha saw something in his face that she'd never seen before. Fear. He was finally realizing that he'd lost. That the woman he'd underestimated, the woman he'd abused and humiliated and tried to break, had just destroyed him. Publicly. Completely. Irreversibly. You can't do this, he whispered, looking at Tasha. You're nothing without me. You have nothing. Wrong, Tasha said, and she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd been to hell and climbed back out stronger. I have everything. My dignity. My strength. My child. My future. And now I have your business too. She pulled out one final document. Did you know that your business partner Stephen has been unhappy with your management for months? He's been looking for a reason to buy you out. Well, after seeing all this evidence of your financial mismanagement, your infidelity, your abuse, he's offered to buy out your share of the company. 4 pennies on the dollar. And I've accepted on your behalf, using the power of attorney you gave me when we got married. Kelvin's face went from red to purple. You can't. That's fraud. It's perfectly legal, Sarah interjected. The power of attorney is valid, and given your documented abuse and financial irresponsibility, the court will absolutely uphold this transaction. Stephen stepped forward then, and his face was hard. I've been working with you for 10 years, Kelvin. 10 years. And I had no idea you were this kind of man. No idea you were capable of this. You're out. Effective immediately. Security will pack up your office tomorrow. Kelvin looked around the room desperately, looking for an ally, someone who would stand with him. But everyone was either staring at him in disgust or deliberately looking away. Even Jasmine. She was backing toward the door, tears streaming down her face, realizing that she'd been played too. That Kelvin had never loved her. That she'd destroyed her reputation and her dignity for nothing. You're all going to pay for this, Kelvin said, his voice shaking. All of you. I'll fight this. I'll fight until there's nothing left. Go ahead, Tasha said calmly. Fight. Use up all your money on legal fees. Destroy yourself trying to destroy me. Because I'm not afraid of you anymore, Kelvin. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. The police officers moved forward. Sir, we need you to come with us. You can pack a bag and then you need to leave the premises. Kelvin was escorted upstairs, one officer on each side of him. The dinner guests started leaving quickly, some stopping to hug Tasha, others just fleeing the dramatic scene. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty except for Tasha, Sarah, Monica, who'd been there the whole time, standing in the back of the room, and the police officers. Kelvin came back down with a single suitcase. His face was blank now, shuttered. As he walked past Tasha toward the door, he stopped. "I hope you're happy," he said bitterly. "I'm not happy," Tasha replied honestly. "I'm heartbroken. I'm traumatized. I'm scared about what comes next. But I'm free. And that's worth more than anything you could have given me." Kelvin left without another word. The door closed behind him and Tasha heard his car start, heard him drive away into the night. And then she collapsed. Her legs simply gave out and Monica and Sarah caught her, lowering her gently to the floor. The adrenaline that had been holding her up drained away all at once, leaving her shaking and crying and unable to stand. "You did it," Monica whispered, holding her friend tight. "Oh my God, Tasha. You really did it." "Is it over?" Tasha asked, her voice small. "Is it really over?" "The hard part is," Sarah said. "There'll be legal proceedings, negotiations. But Tasha, you won. You got everything. The house, the business assets, your freedom, your child. You won." Tasha cried for a long time that night. She cried for the woman she'd been, for the love she'd lost, for the life that had turned out to be a lie. She cried for her baby who would grow up without a father in the picture. She cried for everything she'd endured and everything she'd had to become to survive. But when she was finally done crying, when the tears had dried and the sun was starting to rise through the windows, Tasha felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next few months were a whirlwind. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once the evidence was laid out. Kelvin tried to fight, hired expensive lawyers, made threats. But every time he pushed, Sarah pushed back harder. Every time he tried to hide assets, they found them. Every time he lied, they had documentation proving otherwise. The court case became notorious in Chicago's social circles. Everyone was talking about it. The successful businessman brought down by his pregnant wife. Some people were on Kelvin's side, claiming Tasha had overreacted, had been vindictive. But most people, especially after seeing the medical reports and the photographs of her burns, sided with Tasha. Kelvin's reputation was destroyed. His business partners dropped him. His investors pulled out. His social circle abandoned him. Even Jasmine, after realizing how badly she'd been used, gave a statement to Tasha's lawyers detailing everything Kelvin had promised her, everything he'd lied about. 3 months after that explosive dinner party, the divorce was finalized. Tasha got the house, half of all assets, full custody, child support, and a settlement that totaled just over $2 million. And 2 weeks after that, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She named her Hope. Holding her daughter for the first time, looking down at that tiny, perfect face, Tasha made a promise. Her daughter would never see her mother accept abuse. Would never see her stay in a situation where she was treated as less than. Would grow up knowing that women are strong, that they can survive anything, that they can fight back and win. 6 months after Hope was born, Tasha started her own business. She'd always loved marketing, had been good at it before Kelvin convinced her to quit her job. Now, she started a consulting firm specifically designed to help women entrepreneurs build their businesses. She hired Monica as her partner. She used some of her settlement money to fund it, and within a year they were profitable. Within 2 years they'd expanded to 3 cities. And 2 years after that, Tasha was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference in downtown Chicago. She stood backstage, her hands shaking slightly, Hope with a babysitter back home. She'd worked on this speech for weeks, but now that the moment was here, she felt terrified. Then Monica squeezed her hand. "You've survived worse than a speech," she said with a smile. "Go out there and tell them your story." Tasha walked onto that stage and the applause was overwhelming. The room was packed, hundreds of women, all there to hear stories of survival, of triumph, of transformation. "My name is Tasha Williams," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "And 2 years ago I was in the worst situation of my life. I was trapped in an abusive marriage with a man who made me believe I was worthless. I was pregnant, isolated, financially dependent, and I genuinely believed I had no way out." She paused, looking out at all those faces. "And then one night, my husband poured boiling water on me. And in that moment of absolute horror, something inside me changed. I realized that I had 2 choices. I could accept this as my life, as my fate. Or I could fight back." The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on her every word. "I want to tell you all something important. Something I wish someone had told me when I was at my lowest point. You are never powerless. Even when it feels like you have nothing, even when you're scared and broken and don't know how you're going to survive the next day, you have power. It's inside you. It's always been inside you. She went on to tell her story. Not all of it, some things were still too private, too painful. But she told them enough. Enough for them to understand the journey. Enough for them to see that survival was possible. That triumph was possible. Revenge, she said near the end of her speech, isn't about destruction. It isn't about becoming as cruel as the people who hurt you. Real revenge, the kind that matters, is about taking back your life. It's about building something better from the ashes. It's about looking at the person who tried to break you and showing them that they failed. She smiled then, a real smile full of genuine joy. I have a beautiful daughter now. I have a successful business that helps other women achieve their dreams. I have friends who love me and support me. I have peace. I have happiness. And most importantly, I have myself back. The strong, confident woman I used to be, she's here again. She survived. And so can you. The applause when she finished was deafening. Women were on their feet, some crying, some cheering. And Tasha stood there, soaking it in, feeling that power she'd been talking about radiating through her entire body. She'd done it. She'd survived. She'd won. Meanwhile, across town, Kelvin Richards sat in a small apartment. Nothing like the mansion he used to own. He'd been watching the news, and there was a segment about a women's empowerment conference. They showed clips of speeches, including Tasha's. He watched his ex-wife on that screen, watched her talk about survival and strength and building a better life. He saw how beautiful she looked, how confident, how successful. He saw everything he'd lost. His business was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His friends had abandoned him. Even Jasmine had left him, had moved to another state to escape the scandal. He was alone, broke, and miserable. And watching Tasha on that screen, watching her thrive while he suffered, Kelvin finally understood something. She'd been right all along. He'd underestimated her. He'd thought he could control her, break her, shape her into whatever he wanted her to be. He'd thought his money and his power made him untouchable. But Tasha had proven him wrong. She'd taken everything from him, not through cruelty but through strength. Through truth. Through refusing to accept the role he'd assigned to her. He'd lost everything. And she'd gained everything. A single tear rolled down Kelvin's cheek as he turned off the television. But it was too late for tears. Too late for regret. Too late for anything but living with the consequences of his actions. Tasha steps out of that conference center into the Chicago sunshine. Her phone rings and it's the babysitter saying Hope is awake and asking for her mommy. I'm on my way, Tasha says, smiling as she hangs up. She gets into her car, a practical sedan she'd bought herself, not some status symbol. She drives through the city she's reclaimed as her own, past the house she used to share with Kelvin. She'd sold it, didn't want the memories, toward the smaller but happier home she'd made for herself and Hope. And as she drives, she thinks about everything that's happened. All the pain. All the struggle. All the moments she wanted to give up but didn't. And she thinks about what comes next. The business she'll continue to build. The women she'll help. The daughter she'll raise to be strong and independent and unbreakable. The life she's creating on her own terms. Tasha Williams was broken. She was burned. She was pushed to the absolute edge of what a human being can endure. But she survived. More than that, she triumphed. And as she pulls into her driveway and sees her babysitter holding Hope in the doorway, that beautiful baby girl waving her tiny hands and smiling, Tasha realizes something profound. This is revenge. Not the angry, destructive kind. But the sweet, powerful kind that comes from taking back your life and making it better than it ever was before. She gets out of the car, takes her daughter in her arms and walks into her home. Her sanctuary. Her future. And the door closes behind her, shutting out the past and all its pain, opening up a future full of possibility and hope and the kind of happiness that can only come from knowing you've survived the worst and come out stronger. Tasha Williams won. Not because she destroyed Kelvin, though she did, but because she saved herself. And in doing so, she became the woman she was always meant to be. Strong. Resilient. Unbreakable and free. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in the next one.